One of the oldest rituals of man is to put on a costume and imitate deities that were worshipped so that the spirit or the essence of that deity would inhabit the person. This is what children do when they role play, and we don't even think about it. Like when a child dresses up to be Iron Man or Thor or Spider-Man, or a little girl has a bunch of dresses for Disney princesses, they put on the dresses and they inhabit the spirit of the thing. It's imitation. It's the idea of monkey see, monkey do. We see something and we like it, so then we want to imitate it. It's what children do, because little boys and little girls need an example of who to be. And I guess I could take it a little bit further and say little boys and little girls also need an example of who to find. You need an example of a male figure and a female figure. It's perpetuation of the species. So, when the tribe gets together and one of them dresses up like a bison or the animal that they're going to hunt, and then the rest of them pretend to hunt the guy wearing the skin of the animal that they get for sustenance, they're doing this ritual because they want to eat, so they imitate the hunt, and they imitate a successful hunt, and it sort of psychs them up so that they can go out and come back with food for the tribe, so everybody eats, so they can perpetuate the species. So children need an example of who to be, so young boys would look to a hero virtue. It's reflected, at least in the past, it's reflected in toys and things that children role play. Little girls have baby dolls. They pretend to be moms. They make, how many Little Tikes plastic kitchen sets have they made? Now granted, little boys like the plastic kitchen sets and stuff like that too. And then these things get passed along, hand-me-downs, and people just throw them away. And then somebody says, oh, again, I have children, I have grandchildren, I'm going to take this kitchen play set. It's something we all do. We eat, and children pretend to do what the adults do. They play. Little girls rather pretend to be moms and they have baby dolls. Little boys pretend to be warriors. The idea of a hero of virtue. I want to stay focused on this idea of a hero of virtue. It's a role play thing. Spider-Man, Iron Man. In the past, these are ideas of heroes of virtues from movies and TV shows. You can go through the different generations and see, okay, the 1950s kids liked cowboys, and they had Hopalong Cassidy and Roy Rogers and the Lone Ranger and John Wayne and all the Western stuff. And then with the 1960s, we go into the space age. So we have the idea of James Bond, who's a spy, and he uses these different devices and technologies, and he fights the bad guys. In the 60s, kids had the James Bond car with the ejector seat and all that kind of thing. Guns, ray guns, spacemen. Hey, we're going to the moon. And kids would role play. They have like a little friction gun. And underneath it all is the idea of a hero of virtue. How does a little boy grow up and become a man? Well, the examples we were given in the past was the idea of a hero. Granted, in movies and TV shows and books, hero of virtue a lot of times uses violence to get things done. At least in movies and TV shows, it was shown that violence was an acceptable way to get things done. At least in Western movies and TV shows and stuff like that. And really throughout the whole world. I know it looks a little different. I had to inject something here. I forgot to finish talking about 70s movies, 80s movies, 90s movies, and into the early 2000s. So in the 70s, we had a rise in vigilantism in movies, all the cool Charles Bronson stuff. Clint Eastwood comes on the scene as Dirty Harry. We also have all the cool I think it's 60s going into the 70s, all the cool Clint Eastwood westerns, like all those classic westerns, probably some of the best westerns, my estimation, ever made. And I have videos coming up on this that may or may not be released when you see this, but they are uploaded already. And it's manly movies you will like parts 1 and 2. And I talk about what happened to male figures in movies, and I also have other videos about like how come, you know, a lot of the heroes in movies today are hateable and all the men stand down. Stuff that I'm talking about in this video. But in the 70s you get the vigilantes with Charles Bronson and Dirty Harry, and you know, the cops can't do their job, lawyers are corrupt and the criminals get away. That's all a rib from like Dirty Harry stuff. But also you get a rise in a new kind of dystopian film, or what our future will be like. You have Logan's Run, where, you know, don't trust anybody over 30, and once you get to 30 years old you gotta die, you have to be sacrificed. So you have Logan's Run with Michael York and Farrah Fawcett, you remember that. You have Charlton Heston in Soylent Green, and the Soylent Green is People. It's about a future where we're literally eating each other. You also get the Harlan Ellison, A Boy and His Dog, which is it's like a quote classic movie. Maybe I can find that one and put it up on my Rumble channel for you if you've never seen that one. It's pretty good. It's like underestimated. You also get Omega, which you also get Omega Man with Charlton Heston, which you might know as I Am Legend, which is an old Richard Matheson story. And one of my favorite movies is The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, where there's like one man left on Earth and the whole rest of the world is vampires that only come out at night, and then in black and white, and it's shot really great and everything. You have an old gay guy mincing around the apocalypse talking about his wife and everything. I think it was an old Dana Gold joke. But anyway, I'm talking about 1970s now and male role model stuff. You also have, like, maybe it's not role model stuff, but you have the change in comedy that Animal House provided. So John Landis comes out with Animal House, and it changes the way that people think about comedy. And I think around the same time as Animal House, Caddyshack comes out. I forget when Caddyshack came out. It was 70s, right? Or was it early? It was like 1980 or something. I can't remember. So you have changes in comedy, and you have what's called the too cool to care guy starts to rise. And then you see this, I'm not getting into the 80s yet, but then you have Bill Murray in the 1980s as the too cool to care guy, and then you see that replicated all over the place. Well, kind of that too cool to care guy is in Animal House, because the Animal House, if you watch that movie, the Delta House, they're the bad guys. Like, you know, like you have this college of people who are obeying the rules, and it's this society that's working. And then you have the Delta House, and they're a bunch of losers, slobs, druggies, dopers, drunks. And they get kicked out of college and have a parade where they commit acts of terrorism. That's Animal House. It changed comedy. Check my Rumble channel, because over there I'm going to put up King Frat, which is the Animal House ripoff that's so transparently a ripoff of Animal House. So these things changed the idea of male role models in the 1970s. Vigilantism, the beginning of the anti-hero, which I'll talk about more as we get into the 80s, because you can see that coming in the 1970s. With Marvel Comics, Jim Steranko, I think, is the guy who invented the Punisher. And the Punisher is the Charles Bronson vigilante character. Frank Castle's a guy he's a cop, right? An ex-military, and his whole family is killed by the mob, so then he becomes a vigilante. And you have all the cool Death Wish movies I mean, they're awful, disgusting, and vile, but they're funny. Like, go look at Death Wish 3 body count video, or anything that when Red Letter Media talks about canon films and they reviewed Death Wish 3, that you should have that. I know that one of the last good movies that Bruce Willis made was his remake of Death Wish, and it was good. I was like, you can't do Death Wish with Bruce Willis. It's Bronson. You can't, Bronson in that cool wig and everything. You can't just do Death Wish. But then Bruce Willis did it, and it may have been the last good movie he made before he, what happened. We know what happened to him. He's got dementia and all this stuff, which is sad. Yeah, we didn't even get to Bruce Willis, right? With the Die Hard note. We're getting there. So, the Punisher is popular today, even though I guess you're not supposed to talk about him or whatever. And, but that was the reason he exists, is because of the vigilante stuff in the 1970s. And then I guess you would say there's a lot of vigilante stuff. What's coming to mind as movies that I like is the Jim Kelly stuff. You have Three the Hard Way, where they start killing off prominent black men in America because it's a neo-World War II German plot to kill black people by putting sickle cell anemia in the water supply across the country. So Jim Kelly, and I think it's George Williamson, and another, grindhouse, blaxploitation, which I don't know why they call it that. Cinema. Black people made movies that they wanted to make, so it's exploiting them somehow, even though they made the movies they wanted to make, and they're cool, and we still like that stuff today. We love the Rudy Ray Moore stuff. Everybody liked the Netflix thing. We went back and watched Black Tornado and all these cool movies and stuff like that. And The Devil, and what's that movie called? Anyway, all the cool Rudy Ray Moore stuff. Why do we have rap music? Well, because Rudy Ray Moore wanted to rhyme and say cool stuff in his movies, and now we have rap music. Yeah, and he was just, in the 70s, rapping meant just having a cool, like your urban patois, meter, rhythm, and tone of talking to come off like a cool guy. And you're just rapping. We're talking. We're rapping. And then that became a thing that was exploited in music to be the degenerate, hip-hop is gay that we all know now. So, do I have anything else to say about the 70s? We have this new post-apocalyptic dystopian type of movie, Mad Max. How could I not mention Mad Max? It's also 1970s, from Australia, coming from out of nowhere, right? So we have Mad Max. We have Omega Man, which is the Will Smith I Am Legend. It's the same story. It's old Richard Matheson story from like the 50s or something. You also have Soylent Green. You have probably the latest iteration in the 70s of Huxley's Brave New World, and Logan's Run, and how could I forget Star Wars? That's the end of the 70s going into the 80s, especially Star Wars, because Star Wars, I don't think people cared about the power of myth and Joseph Campbell and stuff, even though it was like a popular book at the time. But George Lucas, they were like, what does this guy have to say? Because this is before social media like it is today. We had TV, we had books, and we had print media, and that's about it. So George Lucas, they were like, where'd you come up with this? And he was like, well, all the stuff I liked when I was a kid. It was the serialized science fiction stuff that he grew up with as a 50s kid going into the 60s. And he would say about, Joseph Campbell and the power of myth, and maybe put some Suktavate in there, whatever shit. And so, you want to make a hit. So then they made all these, from the end of the 70s going into the 80s, all these crappy rip-offs of Star Wars that totally missed the point. And I think I've seen George Lucas talk about it himself, where he said people thought he made Star Wars and it was a hit. And it was just a really simple story for boys, made for boys basically, and everybody liked it. And then all these people made rip-offs and got it wrong, and they spent a lot of money on special effects, and it was a hollow, empty thing. And he said he was using special effects and monsters and stuff as tools to tell a story, and instead what happened was a bunch of crappy directors went out there and made movies about using all these tools, and then trying to put a story into it there where the story wasn't the most important thing. And that's where you get a lot of cool So Bad It's Good movies from Roger Corman Productions, where they would just slap out movies. Like I'm not so much into, when we talk about movies being popular in the 80s that had an influence on young boys and sensibilities, their sensibilities, it's because of the popularity of Star Wars that we got Star Trek in the 1980s, and a movie that's become a cult classic since, John Milius's 1981 Flash Gordon, which is really kind of a template for all the Marvel movie stuff, like that sense of humor and the tone of that Carlos Rambaldi, John Milius, like the mess of Flash Gordon. I mean, it was so popular to 80s kids that when the guy who made Family Guy made those Ted movies where it's Marky Mark talking to a teddy bear, they bring Sam Jones in, who played Flash Gordon. I mean, that movie was a hit with me when it came to illegal black box cable in the 1980s. Anytime that I was home and Flash Gordon came on, I wanted to see it. And I love that movie. Flash Gordon being offered kingdoms by Mings, and yet Flash Gordon is the guy who he himself is wearing lightning bolt on his chest. Also, Arnold Schwarzenegger comes into the 1980s. I guess we can transition from the 70s into the 80s now, but I just felt I have to insert this into the video because I didn't even talk about, you know, Clint Eastwood and the Sergio Leone trilogy, which may have started from the 60s into the 70s. All the cool 1970s, Outlaw Josie Wales, and all that other good Clint Eastwood stuff, even though, you know, the names are escaping me now. And the one where he plays the devil, remember that? The one where Clint Eastwood goes into a western town, and then the cool twist of the movie is, oh, wait a minute, Clint Eastwood's the bad guy. And all that great stuff. All the Charles Bronson anything, all those things. So many vigilante movies, Murphy's Law, what's it called? The Assassins. It's him with him and Jan Michael Vincent. So there's the 70s stuff, and I'm not even talking about the 70s influence on boys through TV. What did they have? But also with the 70s, you get the beginning of that too cool to care character, and I'm probably missing some nodes on characters that were the too cool to care guy, and that leads up into today. Why do people like Deadpool? And that's Ryan Reynolds' whole shtick, is like Ryan Reynolds' character that he plays has always been the too cool to care guy. And then that like culminates in him playing Deadpool, and those are the only Marvel movies I like. I like all three of those movies. I know that they're shit. I saw the Professor X mansion with the Karl Marx bust, and you know what's Deadpool's friends? It's the LGBT alternative lifestyle super teens, and that's Deadpool's friends, right? And he's a pansexual tyrant, deviant guy or whatever. That's Deadpool. So also comic books really got popular in the 70s. You have World's Greatest Detective, the Neil Adams run on Batman. So let's go into the 80s now. In 80s influence on boys, you have Bill Murray becoming popular because there's Stripes. Hey, join the army. It's a well done movie. Is that John Landis too, or is that Harold Ramis? Can't remember. So anyway, you have Bill Murray coming onto the scene. You have Ghostbusters, the influence that had on boys in the 80s. You have all the stuff from the propagandizing toys to children through cartoons made about the toys. That's a whole 80s thing. He-Man, I have the power. You have He-Man. The 80s is steroid-soaked gladiator times because all your big stars. Who do you like? Sly? You like Sly or Arnie? That's Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Time has proven that the only choice you could possibly make is if you have to choose between the two. Sylvester Stallone. Arnold Schwarzenegger is good if you want to make fun of him, which he did when nobody cared about his 80s action movies anymore, and just because he's a bad actor who imitates Charlton Heston in all of his performances, he says, now I want to do a comedy. He's funny because he's a terrible actor, but also he's a bad guy, right? So in the 80s we get Rocky, you know, the underdog story, which this is before they had the internet, right? And nobody knew about modems and all that stuff. That we did have that stuff in the 80s, but you didn't hear about that till the later part of the 80s with, you know, where they're making computer critters talking about the internet and stuff like that. If you remember that, if you were alive back then, go look up computer critters and you can see the early propaganda for maybe you want to have the internet, or like, hey, we have a good computer, we got a Tandy. That's all 80s kids stuff. So, video games, killing stuff for points. The idea of a game is, isolating children, a divide and conquer strategy. You see why I had to inject it? I had to go back and put this in because I was like, I forgot about the 70s and 80s. It's super important on the development of the kind of men that we have today. So you have video games and all the influence of video games, and again, like violence as a solution to problems, which started really with the cowboy movies. Like when movies came out, that had a big influence on people. And I'm not going to go back in time. We're just going to keep going forward. I'm not going to talk about black and white movies and shit like that. Just forget all that. So we're going into the 80s. We have the steroid soap Gladiator, where it became a thing where if you wanted to see the movie, you were going to tell people about the body count. Oh, I killed so many guys, and people would try and count how many people they killed, and people would complain about it. The rise of Siskel and Ebert talking about criticizing movies and telling us how we should think about them, because those were the famous TV critics, and to a lesser degree at some point you had like Rex Reed, if anybody, not a lot of people knew about him, but everybody knew about Siskel and Ebert. And I myself have even gone online and clip grabbed like a lot of old Siskel and Ebert reviews and watched them with a fondness and a nostalgia, which by definition is a form of mental derangement, admittedly. So why am I watching old movie reviews? I don't know, it gives me the warm and fuzzies and I like them. I don't do it anymore, but I do have a file full of old Siskel and Ebert movie reviews, and they have some interesting takes. Some pretty great that hold up till today, and some terrible. But in the 80s, we have Arnold fragging everything with a gun, which is basically, video game mentality. Go in and blow shit up. I mean, that's the Predator movie. It's a very like, we want to talk about toxic masculinity. It's Predator. Here's a bunch of mercenary guys that are used to killing. They're good at it. They put them in the jungle and they fight an alien threat. So it's like the old movies they had, with like the war movies, like black and white war movies, the Magnificent Seven. I've skipped all that stuff. The influence of men of all the war movies. That's, you could go. I guess you could go from 50s, 60s into the 70s because, these things did have an influence on developing the sensibilities of men. I never even talked about Marlon Brando or James Dean and his very short career and how that had an influence on the youth. Like, people were influenced by James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. Also, an influence on the youth and developing sensibilities would be stuff like those inane Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello beach blanket movies, the Elvis movies. How could I forget about the Elvis movies, from the 50s into the 60s? These things had an influence on, I guess you could say, role-playing and LARPing, because kids and teenagers would see these movies and want to be like the characters. Monkey see, monkey do. We see the thing and we imitate the thing. People would... Eddie Murphy had, in Eddie Murphy Delirious, I think it was, which was a famous stand-up bit, famous stand-up special in the 1980s, which also may have been a movie that was in movie theaters, Eddie Murphy Delirious. And he talks about people going to see Rocky and getting psyched, and they're like thinking they can kick everybody's ass because they're Italians like Rocky was. This is how people were. Like, you see the movie and you imitate the thing. This is, I didn't get into the 90s yet, up until today, I guess you could say, as me making this video, is a Fast and the Furious movie comes out, and then young people go out and do stupid shit. It kind of helped further develop like a niche car culture that existed, and really made it blow up, and really made people become interested in this custom car culture stuff. It's because of those Fast and Furious movies. So a Fast and Furious movie comes out, and then, lives are lost, people crash their cars, and young people are driving around like idiots because they get that adrenaline rush because they're emotionally influenced by, the characters in the movie. I mean, look at what's his name? How the one guy from Fast and the Furious, Paul Anderson, I forget his name, Paul Walker, he died driving really fast, or whatever that was, right? And it was about Fast and Furious, and they're all criminals. It's the influence of hip-hop in the 80s when they brought in gangster rap going into the 90s. This has a huge influence, and I can't do this video without talking about the influence of rap and hip-hop music and the people that, hey, we're starting a thing called rap music and it has a fun party togetherness vibe that was co-opted by guys that had money who come from that state that was founded in the desert in 1948, and they said, we want you to talk about crime, and that creates this urban thug culture stuff, and be a criminal and a gangster and a pimp that was exported to the whole world, where you can see guys in Russia wearing wife beaters and imitating black guys from America, and yo 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 and this, and then they're saying everything else in Russian, or like a 98-pound noodle armed Japanese kid, and he's, you know what I mean, the funny meme videos we watch about people imitating black urban American, I'm sorry for saying such shitty terms, but I'm just going to keep going on, okay, imitating all the worst behaviors of poor urban youth, where they tell the guys, hey, we ruined your neighborhood and we brought drugs in, and now we're telling you, we're giving you music. Listen to this music so that a spell is cast over all of you. And maybe you want to sell drugs. Maybe you want guns. Maybe you want to be a criminal. Maybe you want to turn out girls in your neighborhood by getting them hooked on drugs. It was a destruction of black families in America. And then they got to white families with meth. And they got to all the families with drugs, because it was a divide and conquer strategy. How do you control people? Destroy the family. It's a part of the divide and conquer strategy. Isolate people. So there you go. I summarized hip-hop, which goes from the 1980s, when it started out as a nice party vibe and Rapper's Delight and stuff like that, and Fab Five Freddy and all this stuff, and Sugar Hill Gang. And then you can see it transition into Ice Cube with Cop Killer in the 1990s, and NWA, and then who's the other one? Public Enemy. And up until today, we got Eminem singing songs about putting his mother and his ex-wife in the trunk of his car, and making songs about trashing his mother and everything. And that's like the one thing that like black guys in rap didn't do. It was make fun of their moms, because the black family was broken up, like a lot of families, no matter what color they are in America. And so a lot of guys, all they had was a mom. So then Eminem says, you know what they're not doing? Trashing mom. So he trashes his mom and makes raps about it, and that's pretty lame. And I don't even get along with my mom that great, actually. I mean, better now than I did when I was younger. So so these are all things that have influence of our sensibilities as we're growing up as American youths, and then exporting it to the rest of the world. So also in the 80s, you have these guys that were clearly on steroids and getting jacked. I mean, getting jacked basically helped ruin Joe Piscopo's career, because muscles aren't funny, really. I mean, they are when it's Arnold, but that's because we're kind of making fun of him when we laugh at the lines from Jingle All the Way, or any of the Arnold comedies, just to get on Kindergarten Cop, all that stuff. The soundboards from E-Bomb's World, if you remember this, making fun of Arnold and taking all the lines. I'm gonna take my fist and ram it into your stomach, and all this stuff. Making a mockery of Arnold, which is, I think, acceptable. He's not a good guy. So then we have all the Sylvester Stallone. We have Rambo, talking about Vietnam vets. Another thing that had influence on men and male figures through movies and TV shows. In the 80s, we had the A-Team. A lot of this stuff that the Vietnam War was over, and making movies and TV shows about that. We had Airwolf with Jan Michael Vincent. We had the A-Team. We had Knight Rider with Michael Hasselhoff, who's kind of become like a walking punchline. It's sad, but that's kind of what they make fun of him, right? And it's about his car. You also have Clint. Oh, how could I forget about the car movies? The before there was Fast and the Furious, one of the things that had influence on men from the '70s into the '80s was the Burt Reynolds movies. Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise made, like several movies, and it's about driving fast in cars. And these movies were hits, or like the biggest hits. Like if you weren't around in the early 1980s, you have no idea how big of a hit Burt Reynolds was. Like, he was like the guy. And if you go back and watch those Burt Reynolds movies now, he is also one of those too cool to care guys. And he's kind of a jerk, and he's vain, and he's mean. It's like openly in the movies, like Stroker Ace. Like, he really plays it up because he just openly, like, he's vain. He's vain and he's mean-spirited, and he grabs a hold of women's. It's even further exemplified and exaggerated in Sharky's Machine, which was one of the Burt Reynolds movie, which is kind of not a hit, but it was, transitioning from the 70s into the 1980s with these Burt Reynolds, and they're pretty much all comedies. I mean, Sharky's Machine isn't a comedy, at least it's not supposed to be. But the idea, like Burt Reynolds in his movies, like he would like manhandle women and stuff like that, and so Burt Reynolds had an influence on male figures in the 80s, and also driving fast cars, driving fast, being a too cool to care guy, everything works out for him. And again, Burt Reynolds doing the same thing as Charles Bronson, a wig guy. We also have the Fall Guy in the 80s, and in the 1970s we had the $6 Million Man, because Lee Majors played a guy that was transhumanist, like 1970s transhumanist guy, and it was a big hit in the 70s. That like kids were playing with Bionic Man dolls, and he's a guy that's a cyborg essentially. He might have been a Vietnam vet. His body was donated to science or whatever, and they put a $6 million, which is a lot of money back then, a $6 million investment in restoring Lee Majors' destroyed body, and he had powers and abilities far beyond that of mortal men. He's, if you want to get biblical about it, Lee Majors was a man of metal and mirror clay, and that had a big influence on people. Also in the Hulk, it was a big hit for a couple of years and had an influence on people, was Kiss, which is sucked. I don't like them. And you had the Incredible Hulk with the bodybuilder guy, where Bill Bixby would change into the Hulk. That was a hit in the 70s, it was like late 70s into the early 80s. And that had an influence on people. It was like, like a thing that today you would call it meme for a time or whatever. Now we call everything memes. The Incredible Hulk was Lou Ferrigno, a steroid-soaked gladiator bodybuilder guy. And then we get that all through the 80s with all the 80s Arnold movies and all the 80s Sylvester Stallone shit. And I mean, like, when Sylvester was old and he's like, I want to make people remember me again. So he, more recently he did the Expendables, and he did like Rambo 4 or 5, whatever number of Rambo he's on. He did that Rambo movie where he rides off like a cowboy into the sunset with a gaping wound, bleeding out and everything. And that's, like that's maybe his last Rambo movie. They're still making Rocky movies. Now he's the coach. People like them. They say that the Rocky movies are good, and pretty much Sylvester Stallone is the one that manages all that stuff. And I would dare say that who do you like better, Sly or Arnold? Well, Sylvester Stallone. And it's a dumb thing to say, but it was an 80s thing. So it was about what they now call toxic masculinity, the idea of being a super soldier, taking drugs, the scandals that were in baseball that were exposed about, baseball players taking drugs. Also, another thing that we get from the 80s is the rise of the WWF, which is the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, where it used to be like national local wrestling, and you would watch this locally, and you'd have a bunch of guys that were fake wrestlers, and they'd play out soap operas for men, because men don't want to watch drama inside of a room. They don't want to see soap operas. So they gave them the male version of a soap opera. Watch these guys fight each other. And in the 80s, steroids became a popular thing. You get Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant and all those WWF guys. And then, it comes back in the 1990s. with WWE, and then it goes up until today. Like, wrestling is a very popular thing, the WWE stuff. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. But all that stuff, you know, the WWE, where you have gay guys writing dramas for steroid-soaked gladiators, and who comes out of that? You have Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and Undertaker, and Hulk Hogan, rest in peace, hope he got in. All those guys, you know, Andre the Giant and everything. And whoever I'm forgetting, there's so many guys. John Cena is around today now. He's in the movies and stuff. You know, so guys that came out of professional phony wrestling. So that was the 80s up until today. It's very popular. So these things have an influence on developing sensibilities. It's role play. My progeny had like a wrestling phase, and they were jumping around in the trampoline, body slamming, pretending to go in a room and doing cage matches and all. They grew up with that shit. So, and I hated it. I'm not a fan of professional wrestling. I know a little bit about it because, you know, stuff that your kids are into. You'll know about it. You know, if you're not a shit heel as a parent. So that's 80s stuff. We also have, what else do we have in the 80s? We have slasher films come into the 80s. This has, you know, these morality plays where they, you know, it's just about showing you gore and horror and traumatizing the audience, even though the makers of the movies probably didn't know that's what they were doing. Where you're like, well, they're fornicating, so we're going to kill a bunch of fornicating teenagers, and we're going to, and the hero, this is the idea of the anti-hero stuff. I'll get to that. Which comes in the comic books with Frank Miller's The Dark Knight, and it's probably sort of foreshadowed by Neil Adams with some of his Batman stuff, maybe, or stuff Neil Adams was doing in comic books in the 70s into the 80s, probably. I'm not really, well, my buddies were comic book guys, I'm not so much. I told you I don't like superheroes, it's stupid to me. I don't like Batman. Joker's dumb. But you can see that's the idea of the villain being the lead in the movie, because you have all the 80s slasher movies where it's Michael Myers, which there wasn't a lot of Michael Myers movies in the 80s. There's a lot of Friday the 13th, Freddy Krueger, a whole bunch of imitators hoping that they would come up with the next super villain, that he keeps coming back movie after movie to kill people. You have Gremlins and the whole mini monster puppet genre thing where puppets chew up a bunch of teenagers, and just all the slasher films where they come up with a cool murderer guy that they hope will be a hit. And then you didn't have to have a lot of sequels. Like, since there wasn't the internet and there wasn't always this demand, like, people could, you know, like villains and heroes in movies could have longer staying power. You have the finishing of all the Star Wars stuff with the Empire, with the Return of the Jedi rather. So that's part of the 80s, those heroes. But you also have, you know, Fred Krueger, Michael Myers, Jason, whoever else are the murderers and killers. You have James Cameron's Alien, which had, you know, impact on horror. Where the Predator, where yes, you have the steroid-soaked gladiator guys, but you also have like cool monsters, and people like the monsters, which isn't really a new thing. People like the Universal monster movies. You know, they keep making reiterations of Wolfman and all that stuff. I didn't even mention Godzilla and that influence on, you know, having Leviathan crush people, and that you have to make sacrifices to this demon, you know, a beast out from the depths of the deep or whatever, who wants human sacrifice, but at the same time will fight other demons for you. All the Godzilla stuff that goes from the 70s into the 80s or whatever. Did I talk about the 70s blaxploitation stuff that had an influence on people outside of, you know, like, what they weren't, maybe they were made by black people for black people, but everybody else liked them too. The whole thing of Bruce Lee, very short career, he was got like 4 movies. That had a huge influence because even after Bruce Lee was dead, there was so many imitators of all the Bruce Lee thing. You have like a 5'7" Chinese guy, and people like see a Bruce Lee movie and they come out and they get psyched up and like, wah, and they're doing like karate chops and stuff like that, even though Bruce Lee did kung fu. the popularization of martial arts in the 1980s, Karate Kid movies, and all the, you know, rip-off, all the just martial arts stuff that started in the 1970s grindhouse, where they released Chinese movies with bad dubbing, and there's so many of them, the Shaw Brothers movies and all that stuff that had an influence on, you know, like guys like Quentin Tarantino and gave us Kill Bill. That comes out of all the 70s grindhouse stuff, where they just play a bunch of movies, and people that, you know, didn't know, you know, they would just stay and watch hours and hours of movies in the movie theater, like mass ritual events, and they would watch all these old 1960s Shaw Brothers Chinese chop socky flicks. And, you know, it had an influence on rappers like Wu-Tang Clan. They based the Wu-Tang Clan is something out of Shaw Brothers movies, if I'm not mistaken, like 36 Chambers of Death and Shaolin or whatever, all that cool shit. Lone Wolf and Cub, all these things, but things that's Lone Wolf and Cub is like Japanese, the Sonny Chiba and all this stuff. And so the influence of Asian cinema on the West, and ninja stars, all the stuff in the 80s where kids were hurt, getting themselves hurt, cutting their fingers, and, you know, kids literally hurting each other, throwing, you know, dirt mall and flea market ninja stars at each other. There was no law. There was a lot of stuff. Like, I just remember, like, kids having switchblades, and then they became illegal and all this crazy stuff, and kids having ninja stars and sharpening them with their mom's nail file and always having cuts on their hands. And this was the 80s. And ninja, everything ninja. So that's the thing that had an influence. What's a ninja? It's basically like a stealth thief, like teaching kids to sneak around and shit and try not to be detected or heard. And, you know, the origins of, you know, like fake origins of ninjas and all this ninja shit in the 1980s. I guess it kind of never went away. It just kind of morphed into whatever that shit is today. So, in the 90s, what happened in the 90s? I was doing a lot of fornicating in the 90s. What can I say about movies and the influence of male stuff in the 90s? Oh, 1990s gross out comedy, kind of bringing in the idea of the beta male character in gross out movies with all the Kevin Smith stuff and the Something About Mary, where it's guys not the sharpest, not the best. Oh, I forgot about also, with the end of the 80s going into the 90s, really, you have Bart Simpson, which is the too cool to care character archetype brought down to the level of, hey, little kids, maybe you want to be the too cool to care kid. My son, there used to be bumper stickers, proud parent of an underachiever, and people would put them on their cars because their kids were brats, because Bart Simpson, Matt Groening himself said that Bart was an anagram for brat. So, ha ha ha. Very funny. But The Simpsons had a huge impact, and the show's still on TV. But in the 90s, I guess we could transition into 90s stuff. Bart Simpson. And another thing that happened to have an influence on men was the idea of, in the 80s, was this idea of the sensitive man. And that men need to be more sensitive. And they're like, well, we want to get pussy, so we'll be more sensitive. And all this Barbra Streisand had an influence on that, like telling women like men should be more sensitive. And you can see that leading into the 90s, where you have these rough around the edges, you know, like the stuff that Kevin Smith, even though maybe Mallrats wasn't a big hit right away, he was, you know, like people saw that Clerks movie and it had an influence on things. And all the Kevin Smith stuff, like his influences were the stuff that he saw on TV, like all Saturday Night Live shit. And then he made like Saturday Night Live style movies and tried to make, not the too cool to care guy, the guys weren't cool, but they could speak, you know, they said funny things and they had the quips. And the Kevin Smith stuff leads into the 2000s stuff of like the Big Bang Theory being the #1 show on TV. Like if you don't like Big Bang Theory, and I know that I don't, you can blame Kevin Smith for that shit. And he was coming from an honest place. This guy just comes from out of nowhere, doesn't belong to any funny groups or clubs, and he just wanted to make a movie about the way that him and his friends talked. And he did, and it was a truthful, honest thing. And he had an influence on popular culture and developing sensibilities of young men and teenagers, and people probably too young to steal that shit. In the video days, the most stolen movie from the video store would be the VHS of Clerks, because people saw that black and white shitty movie and they would steal the movie, just have it. It was the most stolen movie from video stores. Which is funny, right? So I just used to have 2 VCRs hooked up and would pirate movies. You could just record from one tape to another, rent a movie and then tape it and make copies. So you had to put tape over the tabs, and then you could bootleg them. And then they started putting those strips in that would make the picture crappy, and then you could still copy those movies and people would watch them anyway, even though it was all messed up. So just memory lane here while I can remember anything. So so then in the 90s we have the gross out comedies, and that's really where this too cool to care guy characters came in. And then that morphs further into the early 2000s with American Pie and Ryan Reynolds and more of that too cool to care guy stuff. We also have with the 90s, at the end of the 80s, we have the Batman, the Tim Burton Dark Knight Batman, which come from the comic books, which had an influence on the 80s kids' developing sensibilities. The idea of the anti-hero comes in with Batman as the Dark Knight, where he's kind of like Superman works for the government, sort of, and the world, Reaganomics and all this shit, and Batman's like fighting against these things, and he's old and he's grim, and it's like Batman's last hurrah and stuff, and all the things that Frank Miller wanted to do to comics. And then you get guys from the other side of the pond that are, got Neil Gaiman coming around in the 80s into the 90s, and popularity of Sandman in the 1990s. You have Alan Moore and all his horrible shit. Like, that's The Watchmen, Alan Moore. V for Vendetta, about traumatizing a woman, that's Alan Moore. You have the Jack the Ripper, all the Alan Moore shit. And you have Grant Morrison, who's like a rip-off of Alan Moore. And he brings in, maybe you want to do magic and occultism. And all these things had an influence on the developing sensibilities of boys and young men, making feeble-minded adults addicted and holding on to popular culture stuff. Like the way that Kevin Smith funded Clerks was he sold his comic book collection, and then when he made money, he bought all the comic books back. That, holding on to these things, like part of the popularization of comic book culture in America and all this Comic-Con stuff and being a nerd. A lot of that comes from Kevin Smith. Because people liked his stuff, and they're like, well, the 80s kids growing up with comic books and all the toy commercials, the TV shows, the shows that they grew up with, the 80s kids, were toy commercials. We'll make a cartoon to sell the toys. I mean, they hire Japanese or Korean animators to make your toy line cartoons, propaganda for cartoons, along with the propaganda of whatever the cartoon show was. Rambo had a cartoon show. He-Man was a big hit for like 2 or 3 years, right? My Pretty Ponies. I mean, look what happened to... I don't know how this happened. I don't know about the My Pretty Pony thing. But they got bronies and all that stuff. So you can see the degradation of mankind through popular culture and consumer culture trends. And then, you have people grow up and they become the art directors, and then they try to bring back old franchises that are forgotten. Like, hey, He-Man made a lot of money, let's bring that again. My Pretty Ponies made a lot of money, let's bring that back again. And so when the guys get old enough to become art directors or producers where they're in charge of stuff, they revive franchises that they grew up with, and then they try and make them popular again. And they're still trying to do that. Like, they can't just make new shit. They keep just rehashing old stuff. Like, even Lord of the Rings being a hit, that's an old thing. And they're like, let's do Lord of the Rings and make the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies. You know what I mean? Making those a big hit. So another thing that came in the 80s out of Star Wars was them keep making Star Trek movies. And Star Trek in the 90s became a popular thing that affected the 90s kids with Star Trek Next Generation. And Star Trek Next Generation was so popular, even though maybe people don't think of it as such, but it really was. it was such a hit that they did DS9, and then while Deep Space Nine was going on, they're like, well, let's bring Voyager in. So you had Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. And I'm not sure about this, but they may have had all three of those going at the same time. Like as Next Gen was ending, they already had DS9, and as DS9 was getting close, they also had Voyager or something. You know what I mean? Like, those are all 7 years each, those shows. So Star Trek was a hit, so they kept it going. Then with the 90s kids, you get the Buffy the Vampire and that whole Joss Whedon, which is like also same sensibilities as Kevin Smith, where everything is quips and funny shit. And that had an influence on popular culture. And Joss Whedon's the superhero guy that didn't he do the Marvel stuff or whatever? So you can see that having an effect on not just young men but women too. And it's also like the softening and feminizing of men through all that shit. And just like this idea of the sensitive man, that wherever that shit came from the 1980s, you can see that happening and transitioning into, maybe it comes with the Dr. Spock stuff, not the Dr. Spock Star Trek, but the popular author for women, how to raise your kids. They would read Dr. Spock books, and it was just a doctor whose name was, he called himself Dr. Spock, or that actually is a surname or whatever. It had nothing to do with Star Trek. It was just pediatrician books or whatever, and it was popular in the 1980s. You also have the John Hughes movies for teenagers, which had a big effect on the developing sensibilities of 80s kids. Where John Hughes, what he was doing with those movies is saying, what are 80s kids actually like? And he found out, and he made those movies, and since they were honest and sincere, they still have a staying power with kids today. And nostalgia for the 80s because the world was better, and the coolness of mall culture, and that everything was available and free. Forget hunting and gathering, you just go out to the mall and everything's there, and the economy was doing great and all that. Even though like Reagan started this series of perpetual recessions, which you can see what, trickle down economics, you can see where all that shit led us today, and it's a nightmare. And then in the 1990s with the with the gross out comedies, again popularizing vulgarity, and all that stuff was inculcated in us with Animal House and Caddyshack being such a hit. And then you grew up with that kind of stuff. They had like 3 or 4 Meatball sequels, right? And then you see how that had an influence on the 80s kids, and the 80s kids grew up and became the 90s directors. So the next logical step is just be disgusting, and then you get like next level horror and gore in movies. And then we have the beginnings of digital effects coming into it, and you have stuff like Jim Carrey having an influence on what we now call the millennials, or they were called that then too, I guess. So that's the 90s into the 2000s transition. You have Space Jam, which I don't know if you know this, but Space Jam was like a huge influence on the millennials. And all those shitty millennial videos were like, why are they making faces like that? This is so, like embarrassing. Like you watch videos made by millennials and it's embarrassing. Like they do these monkey shines funny faces. Where do they get that from? Probably growing up with the Jim Carrey rubber face shit. Jim Carrey sucks. Just want to say that. And then you also have Space Jam, Michael Jordan and Space Jam. Something I didn't touch on is the influence that sports always had. That changed in the 1990s with guys like Dennis Rodman and Charles Barkley, where they wanted to be like the bad boys of sports. Athletes, no matter what the sport was, were considered role models for the youth, so they wanted to present like, well, I'm a role model for youth, so they wanted to be like stand-up guys and good men and stuff like that. And then, because people are collecting stats about other men, like knowing statistics that are height and their batting average and all this bullshit, and how many baskets they shot, which is lame. And again, that I would call that part of a feminizing of men. But like boys looking for people to look up to, they would obviously look to athletes. I didn't. I come from a line of men. Like the only interest that men in my family on either side ever had in sports was like if they gambled on that shit. And that's it. Like sports suck. They're stupid. My daddy was a race car driver, if you need to know that. So Sports. I'll just briefly touch on that. Of course, the influence of sports and athletes. But there was a change with that in the 1990s, where sports, Dennis Rodman and his tattoos and his crazy hair and his crazy life and doing attention-getting stunts, that's kind of a new thing. I'm sure athletes always had wild lives going around, traveling, playing, sports and screwing women in your town or whatever. That's not new. But there was this idea of in the 90s that the athletes would be bad boys. There's also a thing that came in the 90s that affected sensibilities, where it just became inculturated that if you're American youth, you just start getting tattoos and graffitiing your body with stupid shit. So that's another thing that became popular in the 90s. And look at the tattoos athletes have nowadays. They have tattoos like the criminals have, like career criminals that have like all these crazy tattoos. That's a lot of your popular athletes today. Have these, look like that. It looks awful. Whatever you think about tattoos. I don't want to see them on a woman's body. Why isn't a naked woman's body tattoos? Get that off. Take the tattoo off. Okay, the clothes are off. Now get rid of the tattoos. So all these things had effects on our developing sensibilities as youths. What else is in the 1990s? I'm trying to think of what was in 1990s science fiction, because science fiction has always been propaganda. What will our future be like? Science fiction is programming towards that end. I don't know. On TV in the 1960s, you had shows like, again, there was less things. So one of the things that was popular for several years was Lost in Space. Star Trek was on for like 5 years, right? And then with diminishing returns, because the last season of the old Star Trek is like, they're like, oh, okay, they're using saran wrap as some kind of, to look like a force field. Do you know they used to do that in TV shows? It's a space TV show, and then would just have plastic wrap, and it was like an invisible force field. They'd make the light hit it so you could see that it was a force field, and you're like, that's plastic wrap. That's probably why they went into the original Star Trek series and added computer-generated effects to the, Shatner, Nimoy Star Trek, so kids would watch it and not go, ugh, look at the effects. I don't know, whatever you think about that. That's the thing that George Lucas kicked off with adding stuff to the Star Wars movies, and it looks like shit now. And people just want to see the old Star Wars movie without the crappy digital cartoons added into it. So you can see enculturating a world of toys and games with the 80s kids, all the video game stuff. I mean, when video games were new in the 1980s, we kind of saw that end. I remember seeing all the video game stuff on clearance, and it was like, that's the end of the video game fad. And that was the first time I had a game system. It was the ColecoVision was on clearance for like $30, like the whole system. Money was different. That was $30 was more than, I guess, a little more, but it was still cheap. And then I had a ColecoVision, and I got a bunch of games on clearance for it. And I was like, I don't care about video games. This sucks. Video games are lame. I play video games and get pissed off. Right? Why am I doing this to myself? I figured out video games pretty quickly by playing them and wanting to hang out with friends, and they're playing video games, and I'm like, women are out there, what are you doing? Like, I'm interested in that. Like, what are you playing? I don't care about Kid Icarus. This is bullshit. I gotta wait. I want to go do something, and I gotta wait because there was no saving games back then. You had to get to like checkpoint. I don't know. I hate video games. So anyway, yeah, I had one. Burger time. That's just pissing me off. I don't care anymore. I don't want to play this. It's time to go outside. It's time to do something. Let's build a soapbox derby racer. I never did that in my life. That's what 50s kids did. They were outside making shit. Kids were smarter in the past and simpler and more naive, but there was some kind of an emotional intelligence that was more healthier, I'd say, in the past. And there was a maturity at a younger age in the past, and that was been enculturated out of us. And you can see the degradation of man, which is why I'm talking about all this shit. You can see, through a thing like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and like what did 90s have, Charmed, enculturating the idea of like young girls like being witches cool, because those shows went on for a long time. It didn't cost a lot of money for those make-em ups, right? They were hits. Aren't they trying to do Buffy the Vampire Slayer again or something like that? So, all that stuff leads into the 2000s with Big Bang Theory. I remember I was making fun of the Big Bang Theory, and I was like, that show's still on? And then my friend said, yeah, it's like the #1 show on TV. And I was like, yeah, haha. He's like, no, it is. And I didn't believe it. I mean, I believed it when, I knew he wasn't lying, but I was like, what? That show where every episode there's a bunch of nerd guys and they're like, hey, Sheldon, and they literally talk like I'm talking to you. Well, actually, I don't know. And it's like a caricature of a fucking nerd. And I'm like, that's the #1 show? What the hell happened? And then it was all this nerd this and nerd that, and you had to obsess over the inane details of the inertia of things, of every single character of Star Wars or Star Trek or Doctor Who, which is something I can't really talk about. I don't really know much about Doctor Who. But that was a thing that started in the 60s, and even American kids liked that because they would bring it over on PBS, RIP PBS, whatever you think about that. And Doctor Who, started in the 60s, I guess, and it never stopped, right? Like, they're still making Doctor Who. Now Doctor Who wears a dress, and he's everything. Having sex with blobs and stuff, whatever. Yeah, I mean, and what else did 90s kids have? Oh, the extreme sports shit. How could I forget about that stuff? Tony Hawk, all that stuff. This skateboarding stuff started in the 80s. And then through magazines, what was it called? Big Brother magazine. There's like these skater magazines, like Skate with an 8 in it, Skater magazine, and whatever the skater shit. That came in the 1980s, and kids were dressing like wearing like pastel blue jogging pants, and they'd pull it up above their knees and pull their socks up. And I'm like, why are the kids dressed like that? And then somebody said, those are skateboard kids. They like skateboarding. And I'm like, why are they all wearing the same turquoise blue pants? It's kind of gay. And, in the 80s, everything was about, being in the closet. You had to hide that you were gay. There was also the AIDS epidemic. So, like, it was not cool to be gay in the 1980s. I mean, being gay in the 80s was not like it is today. Like, it was a form of denigration. They called everybody, gay slurs. Like, this is what the 80s kids grew up with. It was a colloquialism. And that stayed the same through the 1990s. And then wherever in the 2000s when, it was supposed to be nice, those are people too. You can't just call them all these names. So, I did it. I did all those things. So, where was I? Oh, the 80s homophobia, which is part of the Too Cool to Care guy. Another thing that was very popular for a brief time, which was like a sort of heightening of all the stuff that did have an influence on, again, I keep saying it this way, the developing sensibilities of young men, as well as women, was the 80s stand-up boom, where we became obsessed with consuming as much stand-up comedy as possible, which transitioned into the 90s. And there was sort of a height of stand-up comedy in the 90s till people were sick of it. Like, MTV had the half-hour comedy hour, and VH1 had stand-up comedy spotlight, which was one of the things that was like Mark Maron's gig before he did Air America or WTF podcast, which I think he ended it, right? Because nobody gives a shit. Whatever. So, in the 90s, stand-up comedians became like rock star level with guys like, because they imitated this kind of thing. You had 1980s, 90s hair metal, and you had Sam Kinison for a couple years until he was dead. But he was kind of really going out of favor before he died. People were sick of it. It was like, when Sam Kinison got to, I'm a bad boy of comedy, and he's talking about passing his girlfriend around, and that's supposed to be hot. And the audience thought it was gross. They're like, no, Sam, that's not cool. And then he's making jokes. He's like talking about how sexy it was that his friends were making love to his wife. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And then you had Andrew Dice Clay, where he played the stereotype of a 1950s greaser guy, 1950s greaser Italian guy, and he's doing vulgar, coarse language comedy, talk and doing dirty nursery rhymes. And this was like a really big thing for a couple years, like I don't know, 3 to 5 years, with the Sam Kinnis and Andrew Dice Clay shit, and whatever other guys I can't remember that may be part of that. And one of the things that brought that into was Richard Simmons. No, Richard, who survived the 80s AIDS epidemic. Richard Simmons, not Richard Simmons, damn it, Richard Pryor. So you have Richard Pryor popularizing comedy, because he had, like, people went to the movies to see the Richard Pryor comedy movies into the 80s, from the 70s, you know, on the Sunset Strip, into the 80s. Richard Pryor, and then Eddie Murphy came along. And another thing that I forgot about shaping American sensibilities was Bill Cosby and the Cosby Show. The #1 show in America was the show of, for everyone in America, was the story of Bill Cosby as a black pediatrician and his family. I mean, that was like #1 top show for I don't know how many years it was on, but that was like the #1, like, got everybody's watching Cosby. You know, which shows you times are changing, and all this idea about racism and all this bullshit and trying to repaint the past from what it was. That was the #1 show. Everybody watched that. So yes, all these things had effects on our sensibilities. The early 2000s brings in American Pie. I'm sure I'm forgetting a whole bunch of things that had big influence on our development. Internet changed the world, of course. In the 90s, the internet, like late 90s, you have internet coming in, and that affecting our sensibilities. All the extreme sports stuff, which leads into Jackass, which is, I guess, end of the 90s, right? Like MTV putting Jackass on because Bam Margera was selling those CKY VHS videos. Because somehow, again, through the 1980s VHS revolution, skateboarding became a big thing. It was like a niche subculture that kids picked up on, and it became very popular. Skateboarding became popular to kids because, you know, you had wheels. Also, to a lesser degree, there was a popular, like, 70s into the 80s roller skating fad, because there was movies made about this. They had like 1970s roller skating movies, and they're like kind of, you know, aimed at teenagers and stuff. So, you know, whatever. I don't know how much to say about that, but I would just say it's just like getting kids to go roller skating was just getting teenagers to be, you know, making out with each other and leading to teen sex and fornicating. Probably has something to do with the roller skating popularity, because I was one of those kids, and that's what it was about. It was about, like, you know, dancing, you know, like asking a girl to slow skate with you and making out and all that shit, and becoming a teenager. That's all me. I had that shit. And you used to go roller skating to the roller rink every Friday, and everything was cheap, and you just learn how to be a man and try and get girls to skate with you so you can feel boobs, right or wrong. And it's probably wrong, so early 2000s you get American Pie, which is the furthering along of this idea of this, like, beta male wimp type of guy, because the American Pie guys, if you don't remember this shit, the American Pie was very popular. I remember, I was like, why do I keep hearing American Pie? Like, what is it? And people would say, oh, the guy sticks his dick in a pie and his parents catch him. And I'm like, okay, it sounds like, you know, people weren't, like, the Kevin Smith stuff was popular, but I don't know that everybody was talking about that. It was just one of those things that people, the youths, were finding on their own and then liking. I like the Kevin Smith stuff. And he had his whole Skewniverse and all that stuff. But in the early 2000s, you have the internet bringing itself to the, you know, into popular culture, and waiting for downloads of nudes. Like, you had to wait, like, you know, just like you'd wait like a half an hour or 3 hours just for a picture of a nude to download, just to see pornography, when you could just openly, easily go out and buy magazines where you could see penetration. and you're waiting just for a picture to see somebody topless, or and so the internet changing the world. Of course, I bring that into the developing sensibilities of all of us. But at some point I gotta talk, because this interjection has become like over an hour long. So this is gonna be a long video when it's done. So you get all the CGI slop that came in the early 2000s. And I'm just gonna move on with the rest of this whole video now. So you can see the degradation of man through time. And I'm sorry if I'm just pissing out his steam on talking about popular culture into the early 2000s. And then at some point you get into, action stuff. I didn't even talk about Bruce Willis and the effect that Die Hard had on action movies and all the Die Hard ripoffs, because there was a lot of those. There was a lot of stuff that kids grew up with in the 80s because of the VHS revolution that didn't stop into, like you could bring these movies into your home. I know maybe it's lame to call it the VHS revolution, but it kind of was. Like, for on the cheap, people could make movies and you could watch all these shitty movies, and made you think that you could make one. These people with no money trying to imitate Hollywood stuff, and a lot of movies that people liked out of that, because there was a freedom in that. It was like a new version sort of a free press, and people used that freedom to make their versions of Hollywood movies on the cheap, But there was a lot of good stuff, like the Evil Dead came out of that, kind of DIY, do-it-yourself movies. And the Evil Dead, they made a series of it for, like they made the Evil Dead, like 4 seasons of the Evil Dead show with Bruce Campbell. They keep making reiterations of the Evil Dead series, right? They keep making them. And Sam Raimi was one of the guys, for the longest time, he held on to the rights for that. That's why there were so many VHS, DVD re-releases of the Evil Dead, with they keep adding extra bells and whistles to it, because he owned it. So then we get into whenever they started with that Marvel shit. Oh, they're gonna make the X-Men movies. So that was the beginning of all that stuff in the 2000s, and they really were a huge hit. Like, that first X-Men movie was a huge hit. Even though if you look at it now, it's like shitty. It's awful, right? Hugh Jackman with the gel in his hair, so he has devil horns or whatever. Halle Berry, Storm, and all that stuff. So finding out that worked, and then the Wesley Snipes Blade movie was kind of like a test. We're like, oh, people like this stuff. So they did Blade Vampire Hunter, and that was a hit. So I think that helped say, let's spend some more money and try and do superhero stuff. So you had the Batman movies until they pissed out with they had to start with Tim Burton, and then end with like the Val Kilmer or Batman or George Clooney, whoever was the last Batman. And then they're like, okay, we need a different kind of superhero stuff. So they went back to the more, I don't really look at the X-Men stuff as grim and gritty, but they put them all in black leather suits. Like, we can't have people running around these crazy, bright colored costumes, Wolverine with the yellow and blue suit, and all these, people like spandex and stuff. So they put them in leather instead of spandex. And X-Men was a big hit. So you had all the Bryan Singer X-Men stuff. And that leads into the Marvel movies. And then you had the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. That was a big hit. And after the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, he made 3 movies of that with the, like the third Spider-Man movies kind of sucks. But then they're like, okay, the superhero movie stuff, let's bring back the old gods and have people worship and venerate them. So they put all this money into what we now call the MCU. And I don't know who came first. It was the Iron Man movie, maybe. They did Ghost Rider with Nick Cage. There was 2 of those. And then they invested the money and the big bucks on, we're going to do this world building and all this multiverse shit that we got now. And it's all propaganda. It's all bad news. Go watch my videos on multiverses as propagandas to open us as portals to the demonic and all that shit. So, Iron Man is a big hit. Everybody loves that. They love that. And they're like, well, those are the good movies. I don't like any of them. But anyway, you get the Iron Man. And they did the Captain America movie. I remember thinking, oh, the Winter Soldier is this kind of neat. And then they show Iron Man not Iron Man, what's his name? They show Captain America running around on a boat, and I was like, okay, this is bullshit. This is dumb. Remember that where he's running around on a battleship or something? I mean, this is dumb. But everybody loved it. And I did Thor, and they're like, hey, we're building the Avengers team. We're gonna put them all together. They also did, maybe after the Spider-Man movies, they did the Hulk movies. They did the Ang Lee Hulk movie, which is, people like, that's not it. And then they did the Edward Norton Hulk movie, and that was stupid too, but it was better than the Ang Lee shit. And, The Matrix, how could I forget? I forgot. Sorry. The 1990s and The Matrix, which brought anime to us, because anime was showing up in VHS in the 80s and 90s. Kids were growing up with inappropriate anime and downright X-rated and pornographic anime. I remember the VHS tape trading days, and they would show you like Wandering Kid or The Legend of Overfiend, and there would be like these, like, where the woman is being assaulted until she explodes. A demon seed, like, and they animate it, and like, what is Japan? This is disgusting. Like, people are getting off on this. They're just basically animating assault that ends with the woman exploding. Like, gross shit. And I'm blending horror and gore. And thanks, Japan. Japan had a boom in the 1990s that affected sensibilities, developing sensibilities through the anime stuff. Also, to a lesser degree, a heavy metal magazine. Like, there was stuff that was happening in the 80s where children were being exposed to pornography and the parents didn't know about it. Like, Heavy Metal magazine was pornographic. And you could just buy it. Like, I remember going to the pharmacy and I'm like, the kid's looking at heavy metal, and I'm like, you should be looking at that. And Heavy Metal wasn't about rock and roll music. Heavy Metal magazine was a science fiction magazine. It was like a comic book. It was like $5 magazine format comic book where it had all kinds of perversions and horror and violence and gore and comedy and all that. It was all predicated on sci-fi, which they had that stuff in the 70s too. There was something that had an effect on developing sensibilities in the 1950s on youth for horror and gore and violence was EC Comics, which led to the Comics Code. And then in the 60s and 70s you had creepy and eerie magazines, and this was popular culture stuff. Like, a lot of people, maybe people don't remember it now, but eerie and creepy and these horror anthology magazines were very popular, and they just spin them out. It was like easy work for comic book artists to just spit out this stuff. And then whatever Charlton Comics put out, like these, predicated on the EC stuff from the 50s, the EC Comics and Tales from the Crypt and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't talk about that before with the 50s. But all these things have effects on our brains and as we're growing up. And this is the whole point of this episode, is to talk about the degradation of man through all these things. So you have The Matrix bringing our influence on anime and Asian cinema, and then Quentin Tarantino, same thing. He saw all this stuff. You had the Grindhouse stuff from Tarantino, the Asian cinema stuff of action movies and that kind of influence. Also the crime movies, the influence and the effect that the Godfather movies had. The Godfather movies had a big, this is 70s going into the 80s. The Godfather, those two movies, had a huge influence on people's minds. Like, it brought in this idea of, like, you want to behave like the Godfather, which is dumb. And you know how popular that was, because that leads into the Sopranos shit that's still ongoing. Like, they ended the Sopranos, which was a big hit, and then they did Oz about prison culture. You have the influence of rap continuing to make youth become criminals, like, just outright. Like, here's what we have for youths growing up. Maybe you want to be a criminal because of the music you listen to. Makes it sound cool. I mean, rap music is responsible for getting hordes of young men put into jail. It's just like, look at what rap music did to destroy children or teenagers, and they got them. They created a drug culture to get people locked up. That's evil with a capital F. that's as cold. Like, I'm just telling you, like, straight. Like, look at, and then now people make fun of hip hop because it's all gay, because Diddy and all this stuff, that he got away with it basically. But it inculated like a crime, urban thug culture, and exported that to everywhere, to just like, you know, how many kids got locked up over this shit because of music that they listened to. The music had such a powerful influence on them that they became criminals. That's heartbreaking. But then the Matrix and all that shit, and using the digital effects to do bullet time, and how that changed how we think about things. Also in the 90s, we had the club culture music. How could I forget about that? That was aimed at youth too. This techno music, where it's like, you know, probably from Tavistock. This, you know, ugly, horrible dance hall music that now has become like the EDM music. And if you've seen the latest EDM videos of the big concerts, they're outright having rituals to demons, and they're playing EDM music, and you can see a whole ocean of young people, and they are just and developmentally retarded old people, and they're just swaying, thousands of people just swaying back and forth while demons perform on the stage. Like, looks like Inca Aztec. Did you see this video? Go look up EDM demon ritual or whatever, and you'll see thousands of people all swaying in unison back and forth. It looks like old ball worship that they could never put into movies, because you could never get that many people together to do, like, you know, like praising demons. That's the EDM festival now. Major Lazer, go to my Rumble channel and watch my Saturday morning Pharmakeia, and you can see a whole Major Lazer episode where he's talking about, on the island of Ibiza, there's the rave rats, and it's a bunch of demonized teens that you know, degenerated because they're like demons that came out of EDM music or whatever it is. Like, just watch Major Lazer Rave Rats cartoon if you want to see that. And you know, like, just watch the video. Let's watch that concert, that EDM festival demon video clip thing. It's crazy. It's like a TikTok or something. I should have that clip to use at some point without the music removed out of it, so you can see the ritual. I mean, that's degradation of mankind, getting people influenced by music. You know, people passing out at a Taylor Swift concert. This is all effects of this shit on young people. So, destruction of the hero of virtue, the effeminizing of men, the encouraging of not being a hero but being a villain, which comes into all the gangster rap stuff that morphed into just what hip-hop is. And the idea, something that came in the 1990s, was a colloquialism of being a pimp. Like, yeah man, he's a cool guy, he's a pimp. And a pimp is a guy that sells women as whores. Like, how's that cool? But guys like Ice-T and Ice Cube and, I don't know, whoever else was around in the 90s, you're Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, you're supposed to think that it was cool. If you were a cool guy, you were a pimp. And that's degradation of a man. That's not a man as being a protector of a woman. That's a man turning out women. Bitches. Women were called bitches. So this is all degradation of us. Destruction of hero virtue. You can see it starting back then. A hair metal band guy dressed up and wore makeup and teased hair like a woman and dressed like a woman in tight clothes and did like a sort of like extension of 70s transvestitism in music, where they had guys like T-Rex and David Bowie, of course, propagandizing transvestitism and transgenderism. And then, you know, you can see that come to a head, or whatever you want to call it, with the 80s hair metal shit, where they look like bitches and they wear lipstick and they're like pouting at you and singing songs about getting laid. And it's also not being a man, because all those guys in those bands back then talked about how they had their girlfriends pay for shit, and you know, their girlfriends taught them how to put on makeup, and their girlfriends have the job, and they're going around screwing other girls and playing in bands and couch surfing and all that stuff. That's not a man. That's the degradation of all this stuff. So yeah, you know, and then we get the Marvel movies and being a nerd and being like shut in and being online all the time. And then now I'm just gonna go to the rest of the video because I could just keep talking about this shit. This video got so long. It's gonna take a while to upload, so, and to export. So, I'm probably missing like so many things, but there's a lot more. I just wanted to be as thorough as, well, now I guess I'm being as thorough as I want to be about it. So we can see the degradation of the idea of a hero virtue, if only through hip-hop culture, because it's about being a criminal. That's not heroic. And the idea of popularizing stealing, I mean, to the point where the music is stealing. I mean, sampling music is stealing somebody's beat, somebody else's melody, parts of somebody else's song, and then just exalting yourself over that. I'm the best MC. I'm this. I'm that. I have all the things. I have the bling. I have the money. I have the girls. I have all the earthly things. And everybody else is shit, and I'm the best one. And it's stolen beats and melodies. And they're criminals, and they sell drugs, and they have all the weed, and they have all the drugs, and they're doing syrup, and all the and all the stuff, and it's you know, I don't want to say it's an anti-hero, but it's like an anti-Christ. It's like it's you know, and all these guys, we found out that they will tell you they all made deals with the devil and sold their souls, and now, you know, hip-hop is openly gay and openly satanic, with Lil Nas X riding down a stripper pole into hell and blowing the devil, and we're already over that guy. He's lame. Nobody likes him anymore. I never liked any of that shit, but and I'm old. I'm not supposed to, but you see what I mean. So yeah, I mean, and you know, and now I'll just go back to the rest of the video about the destruction of hero of virtue. And you know, I feel like as soon as I shut off the camera, I'm gonna remember 5 things and go, oh, what about? Wait, there's more about how we became shitheels and we gave it to our kids and let them just have it. And a kid is a word I use a lot, and I shouldn't, because they're children. A kid is a child of. A kid means a child of a goat, because, you know, like little goatlings are kids, and it's like, yeah, we've turned our children into kids, children of the goat. What side are you on? Are you inside the sheep or the side of the goats? You want to be a sheep, they get into heaven, the goats don't. So, yeah, I guess I'll just go back to the rest of the video now. What a long interjection. It's like a whole other video. So, yeah, you can see the degradation. Also, just, you know, watching weird stuff, whatever it is that made kids bronies, like abusive fathers making, I don't know what that shit's about. That's heartbreaking, isn't it? They're still bronies, furries, wanting to, like, making the villain the hero. I mean, you see that all over the place now. They've basically taken every villain. It's like sympathy for the devil, so that when you watch the movies and you figure out that the people making them are evil, which we figured out, Hollywood's been exposed. They make movies where they want you to be sympathetic to the villain, because they're like, well, maybe you should be more sympathetic to the villain when we're making these movies. And they're like, why? And they're like, well, because a lot of the stuff that the bad guys do is relatable to what the people making the movies are doing, because a lot of the people paying for and making the movies are bad guys. So they're like, well, maybe we should cover our asses to say, hey, you know that movie you saw where the villain wasn't so bad? When I get caught, can you maybe, you know, be more sympathetic to me? Because in the movies we let you know why the bad guys do these things. And it's also to, like, sort of venerate that you would like the villain. You know, the villain's supposed to be the hateable character that you want to get a comeuppance. But if you're making movies and you are a villain, you don't want to get a comeuppance. You want to be made more sympathetic. And in terms of a slasher movie, like, they keep getting away with it. It's always a new crop of teenagers to be killed, and the villain lives to kill, or, you know, is undead to kill again. Unstoppable killing machine. The popularity of the Terminator movie in the 80s, I didn't even touch on that, because that's another Arnold one that I should touch on. That changed a lot of things. the idea that Arnold Schwarzenegger personified because of his steroid use and all that stuff, unstoppable killing machine. And you know, poor Arnold. I mean, they were injecting him with steroids when he was a kid. Like, he's a man-made monster. He's like a Frankenstein, Promethean man type of thing, if you think about it. Poor guy. Do you ever see that video where he's like in his 70s and this guy does a running jump kick, kicks him in the back, and all he does is this, and he turns around and he's like, "What is this?" It didn't even faze him. So that's funny. So the idea of this unstoppable killing machine translated into heroes, where, you know, like you have one, like with the Rambo shit, what Rambo movies became, and all the other Arnold stuff, where it's just like one guy killing all these people and they can't touch him, and if he gets shot and, you know, stabbed and cut and beaten and tortured, and he just keeps on killing. So, you know, it's not realistic. It's not necessarily a hero virtue, but, you know, that is the idea of heroes that we were given in the 80s and then going into 90s. Bruce Willis, all the Die Hard movies where it's just a regular guy and he gets put in these like increasingly impossible scenarios, and he comes out of it, and, you know, I'm just a cool guy. You know, Bruce Willis, another example of a lot of his movies. Not all of them, but a lot of them, he played the idea of a too cool to care guy. These things have influence on us. And then you get into obsessing over superheroes, which is, again, is not a manly, masculine thing to nerd out about shit. I mean, people did it anyway. But when you have Big Bang Theory being the #1 show, which is also propaganda against God, it's about science. We love the science, and science is our God. Which is, you know, sort of anti-God, really. It's not God anymore. It's about science. Oh, well, we don't know how to explain it, but we know that it's not God. That's propaganda. And again, that was the #1 show in America. I don't know how it did in the rest of the world, but I can't imagine the Big Bang Theory was a big hit in Russia, for example. It's just not going to... This is a different temperament for the Russians. They're, you know, like talking about macho stuff, which is a Mexican thing. The Russians are more... I would say probably still in touch with their masculinity than whatever they did to America and the UK. So, you know, in Japan. Japan's been effeminized, and you can find other people's videos on how that's been done. That's like part of World War II. U.S. occupation of Japan probably has something to do with that. And probably the research of Unit 731, which is Japanese dead. That's really disgusting. So, and, you know, China gave us the cool chopsaki flicks. So that's it. I'm gonna go now. It's gonna continue with the rest of the video. So thanks for hearing me. It was a long one. I hope it's good. I hope you like it. So kids grow up pretending how to be a hero. Why? Because it teaches us how to be a man, and little girls learn how to be good moms, and there's like a temperament in women that's to be agreeable so everyone can get along and facilitate that, which has to do with their safety and survival and stuff like that, having a place in the world, peacemakers and stuff. In one way, little girls are given that idea of like, I guess you could say, virtues in a woman and virtues in a man. And men are supposed to take on these things. In the past, throughout history, men have fought the wars, men have protected the tribe, the village. There wasn't police, there was men. The men would say, what's going on? Unacceptable. And the men were the police. Now we have a separate class, you know, in a lot of places in the world, well, everywhere really, where the police do those things. And, you know, if you're not one of the police, you shouldn't do those things. But when we're children, what we're given is the idea of a hero virtue, and you can see how, with all the propaganda that's been since like probably before 2016, but I think it started to become really clear around 2016. Men stand down, men are problematic. The idea of the toxic male was taking hold, even though it was probably being established before 2016. The idea that something was wrong with men, and just at their core they weren't right. And little boys shouldn't be given toys of war, except that when we grow up, a lot of countries' governments say, look, when you grow up, you have to do military service. Like, that's part of growing up, is you're going to join the army, and if we need you, we want everyone to be trained for that, trained for war. And when you're a little boy, you learn about how to be a hero of virtue, and then that's stuff that you're programming yourself for adulthood, basic stuff. Maybe you're not going to be like a hero, like a superhero or anything like that. And superhero is worship and veneration of the old gods. But really what children were getting out of, like pretending to be Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, was the idea, heroics. Something's wrong, and I'm going to set it right. This is what boys grew up into men to be. Something's wrong. I have to do my part to help, keep things safe for all of us, for the children, and, men working together before we had things like police forces. And, doing the right thing. And again, this has to do with like perpetuation of the species stuff. Like, here's a man, here's a woman. As children, we need a good example of each. So you would want your parents to exemplify that, and parents would want to exemplify those things. Well, I have to be a good person because I have children, and I want them to grow up to be good people. And because if we don't have a good example of who to be and who to find, a good example of a man, a good example of a woman, we can't be that, and we can't find that, and society will collapse. Our world won't work. Our village will fail. And you can see that. I remember seeing a video years ago, maybe around 2016, about changes in publishing, where all the major publishers of, like books that you read, like, which I think most of them are in the world, are like in New York or something, like they all have some kind of representation in New York. And all the major publishers were giving their notes of how they're going to proceed with the future, which probably has to do with, World Economic Forum stuff, and how they want to shape the world into one government worldwide, one-size-fits-all mentality for the world. And maybe it has something to do with BlackRock, and that they manage 12.5 trillion in assets internationally, transnationally, influencing, the famous Larry Fink thing. We at BlackRock believe in forcing behaviors, so we're going to force behaviors. And the behaviors they're forcing through programming, through all media for the youth, is men stand down. The publishers saying, in essence, just to sum it all up, the major publishers for books that people would read were saying, we're going to postmodern deconstruct everything, and in that we don't want any more heroes of virtue. So they were told, no more heroes of virtue. We don't need that stuff anymore. We don't want young people growing up to be heroes. We want them to grow up to be whatever we say they are. So therefore, the idea that men would grow up and take on traits of a hero virtue and exemplify virtues, we don't need that anymore. You're toxic. Shut up. Stand down. We'll exaggerate the qualities that are good in women of being agreeable and trying to get everybody to be along, and we'll twist that in the way that we want it, which is, everybody be agreeable and be more like a woman, and just everybody have the same idea that you will do anything to get everybody else to shut up, so that powers that be can just tell us how to behave, and they'll put out problems for us, and then we'll say, do something about these problems, and then they'll say, well, here's what we're willing to do about that problem. Go along with what we say. So we don't want no heroes, okay? That's the word that went out. And before a movie or a TV show or a streaming series or a game gets made, you have to write what the story is. You have to say, here's what our idea is. So you can see everything being destroyed across the board. And video games were one of the last refuges where you could go into a video game, and by blowing up shit for points and killing, you could exemplify sort of the idea of hero virtue with motor skills. So they went and said, well, we have to invade all media. Guys like playing video games, we're going to go into Call of Duty, just for one example, and change it into, here's World War II. Your main character is a red-headed lesbian amputee, and that's your World War II. That's your main character. We're going to go in, oh, you like pretty girls and you want to play the avatar that's a pretty girl? Make them all ugly. Make them disagreeable and hateable. Here's all these horrible ideas we have about what a man is. So men, you don't be that anymore. We're going to show you what a man is. We're going to have a woman exemplify what we see a man as, because we want you to see men this way, so men stand down, you know, like globally. So let's make the women ugly inside and out. We don't want you looking at her like that. We'll call that the male gaze. What is it to be a man? Something hateable, because here's a female character taking on the idea of a hero, but completely without virtue. It's about the destruction of the idea of a hero with virtue. The idea that a husband would be like in a marriage vow, be willing to lay down his life for this woman, and that the woman would be there for the man in sickness and in health, because this is the man that's willing to die for her. We don't need strong examples of a man or a woman, and what our strategy for everything. This is like World Economic Forum and stuff like that, and the ideas for, you know, authorship for New World Order in The Brave New World for Huxley and 1984 for George Orwell. No love, no couples. The strategy is divide and conquer. Don't be a hero. We don't want those anymore. Will be whatever we tell you to be, and we want to put within the youth, because it's always about programming the youth. What do you grow up with? We're going to force behaviors. We know that the people who are here that are adults don't like any of this stuff, and the kids growing up won't like it, but we don't want to give them anything else, and we want to destroy the past. Kill it if you must. Kylo Ren said that in one of the shitty Star Wars movies that nobody likes, that ruined Star Wars. Forget about all that Joseph Campbell hero's journey stuff. There's no journey anymore. Hand it over heroes. Here's a woman. Give her all the stuff that belonged to the man that was the hero before. We're going to have a woman usurp the man and be rude about it. Because again, what is a hero now? No virtue. It's all the worst qualities of a man, so you won't like him. Who wants to be that? Nobody. That's why the merch doesn't sell. That's why all these can't get rid of Captain Marvel toys, and it just goes to the dump and it gets shredded and recycled to make other plastic trash. So they don't want anybody to be a hero. They don't want you to have any idea what that is, and they want the kids to grow up without any idea at all of how to be a hero. No more heroes. We're going to trade roles. We're going to have the woman be the hero of virtue. No. We don't want women doing that stuff. We don't want women willing to lay down their life for the right thing, because we know that they will. Because, and who's we, who's they? The wealthy elite whose fortunes shape the fates of nations, that instead of lifting up mankind, we can openly see, and they're telling us that our strategy is you will live in a pod, you will eat the bugs, you will own nothing. And you're going to love it, because we're going to control how you think with chemicals in your brain. We're going to give you cortisol to make you fearful, and then we're going to let you have dopamine by other stuff that you watch to keep you going back and forth between dopamine and cortisol. You in the future will be happy, because we're going to make you happy by controlling the drugs within your own bodies, by manipulating you. And, you know, don't be a man, don't be a hero, don't be a woman. In fact, if you're a man, you should be more like what we think a woman should be. And we're going to make women awful and not at all what a woman really is. And, you know, like, how do we get here? We come out of a womb, all right? First we come out of somebody's balls, and then into the world out of the womb. And we need both. We need an example of who to be and who to find for peace on earth for all mankind. And they don't want us to have that. They don't want us to be that. We'll tell you who you are, and they want you to grow up with it. They want you to grow up with no idea of how to be a hero, how to be a man, or how to be a woman. You're going to eat bugs. You're going to live in a pod. you're not going to own anything. And we see this reflected in the world around us by guys we're told are some of the richest people in the world, even though we don't really know who the richest people in the world are. We get who they give us, which are guys like Jeff Bezos, who says you don't need to own your gaming PC, and even though the games all suck now anyway, like the Nintendo Switch, you can have the console plastic thing, but you don't really own it because we'll shut it off whenever we want if we don't like something about what we find out about you through playing your Nintendo Switch 2 or whatever. Elon Musk saying, I have a new car, but you're never going to own it. You can only lease it. And it's very transparent that they're saying, well, here's the future that we're heading you into as some of the figurehead puppet guys for richest people in the world. And George Soros being openly evil and telling his fond, warm, fuzzy reminiscences about being a World War II German youth who took away everything from people, and then funding, acts of, funding Antifa and all this other evil things that guys like this do. You can know about who those guys are. You can know about those rich guys, and that they're evil. You can know about Elon Musk, he's evil. You can know about George Soros, he's evil. You can know about, what's the other guy? All these guys. You can know about them. Elon Musk or whatever, and these will be, just stand down, just forget it, you don't have a chance. You have Klaus Schwab come out in World Economic Forum and say that you'll eat the bugs and live in the pod and all that stuff. Like we're just going to roll over. You're just like, we're going to do it anyway. Don't fight about it. And they want kids not to grow up with any tools to be able to fight about any of this stuff, to go against it. That they don't want anybody to grow up with the idea that sometimes being a hero means laying down your life to do the right thing. For example, like Roddy Piper in They Live by John Carpenter. Remember the old 80s movie that people still talk about today? Where he lays down his life so that the truth of what they're planning can be exposed. And, they we're coming for your kids. I mean, that's been said, and we thought it was about people who wanted to, do horrible things to our kids physically, which will hurt them mentally. But we're coming for your kids is already something they've been doing. We don't want you to know who to be when you grow up. We don't need this idea of what's a man and what's a woman and how to be a family and how the family stays together. Because if we have a nation full of people that are families, they'll never go along with the stuff that World Economic Forum at the behest of the wealthy elite whose fortunes shape the fates of nations want for us. So break up the family. Divide and conquer. It's the world's oldest strategy. Isolate and keep people. You isolate someone, you keep them alone, and they don't care about other people. They only care about themselves. It makes you selfish. And then that's how we get the terms that they come up with, like transhumanism. What's with all this trans this and trans that? It's a divide and conquer strategy. Trans means cross, a term coined by Julian Huxley, brother of Aldous Huxley, who gave us Brave New World. And the Brave New World, love can't survive. And that's the moral of the story, is in the future, love doesn't stand a chance unless you love the state, which is the same message of Winston and Julia and their failed love, where they're tortured till they don't love each other anymore. And that's from George Orwell's 1984. Where you're supposed to love Big Brother. You're supposed to love the idea of the state and the authority over you, but don't love each other, because if people love each other, they'll be willing to lay down their lives to stop evil. And we don't want anybody stopping evil, because the wealthy elite whose fortunes shape the fates of nations are evil, because they're not leading mankind into anywhere good. They're pushing us together on top of each other, telling us to fight it out, and then they're taking everything away from us in the meantime. And the World Economic Forum, which is evil, is saying, here's what your future is going to be like. We're taking everything away from you. You can live in a like a micro. You can live in a pod, in your life pod, death pod, same thing. And if you don't want to be here anymore, you can, offer yourself up as a sacrifice to the state and go inside the death pod. And Canada already says, Canada's already has them. So Yeah, I mean, you can see how they put the message that, I know you know what that means, that they put in all the movies and TV shows. They want it to be omnipresent so that you can't grow up in this world, whether you're you're Zuma or Alpha or Gen Beta, all until they get to Gen Epsilon or whatever you want, which is again is a Brave New World reference. The lowest class in the Brave New World was the Epsilon class, and they're basically, only functional to like pull a lever, even though. And this is because Huxley wrote Brave New World in like the 1920s, setting us up for today. But in the future, because AI, we don't need anybody to pull a lever. So why don't we all be Epsilons? Why don't we all be Gen Epsilon? They don't want us to know how to be. So they don't even want our role play as children to put any programming in us that we would fight against the system that they want us all to live in. And look how they take everything away from us. We had a consumer society where you watch the movies, you buy the merch, and then you could role play as a child of how to do the right thing, how to be a good mom, how to be a protector and a provider for little boys, how to be a hero, how to be willing to go to war and die for your country. And what is a country? It's not supposed to be this abstract thing. It's all the people that live there and their way of life. And a way of life that would support being able to have a family so that for generations to come, you could have a healthy life, clean air, fresh water, safety, nobody fighting, a thing that would lead to world peace. So the wealthy elite whose fortunes shape the fates of nations and pay for all the movies and TV shows and tell you what your top books are and tell you what your best movies will be and put all the money into the best propaganda, don't want families. Disney isn't a girl brand. It's an anti-family brand. They don't want any families because people will be willing to lay down their lives for their family, no matter who, kids or adults. Same. Men or women, same. And if you have a whole country of people who are families, you're not going to win against them. So destroy the family by any means necessary. And then you can go into watching videos about how wherever you're from, in America, in the UK, whatever it is, in Australia, how they keep destroying the idea of a family so you wouldn't want to be one. And more importantly, to destroy that in childhood so you don't know how to have one, how to be a family, how to have a family. So anyway, that's what's happening. They don't want children to have an idea of how to be growing up, and that's why Larry Fink is telling you with BlackRock, we're going to force behaviors, and since we're handling your assets, you're going to force behaviors, and you guys program people how to think about everything. So stand down, whether you're a man or a woman, and while you're growing up as Gen X, Y, Z, Alpha, Beta, we get to the end of the alphabet. What's after Z? And we're starting over again. Gen Alpha, Gen Beta, and it's nothing good. Gen Alpha can't read. How many times have you seen thumbnails like that give you shivers that you don't want to? You're like, I don't need to watch the video. They're telling us they can't read, and that they're making kids stupid. And we're seeing videos where kids flip out because the tablet's taken away. Yeah, that's programming for the future. They don't want you to know how to function. Wear diapers, shit yourself, fetishize it, sexualize it, and keep kids in diapers their whole lives. Like, look at the degradation of mankind through media, through watching media. It's evil across the board. And you can go back in the past and see how it was still programming for the future, but people weren't programmed generationally. So you can see through movies and TV shows the degradation of mankind until you get up to the most modern entertainment and look at how degraded it is. It's on purpose and it's by design. It's leading us into one world government, and that it's evil. They're evil. It makes me think of that Asimov story, Battle for Gondahar, and you don't need to know what that is. But Asimov is the guy that wrote I, Robot, where we create robots to have AI and then we fight a war against them. Mankind against mankind's creation. But in Battle for Gondahar, they create an AI brain that controls the whole planet, and then it breaks down, and then the planet degrades, and what was will be. Those who forget the past or don't know what it is are doomed to repeat it. And that's the story of Neo in the Matrix, right? Isn't it? Oh, you thought you were special, you thought you were the one. You have any idea how many times we kept reforming society and shaping it to be the way that we want it to be? And how do people live in the Matrix? They live in a pod, and they eat Soylent. They eat each other. They recycle everything, and you're just watching stuff online. Like, being in the Matrix is just watching stuff online. It's how they're taking over the world. Keep watching, and we'll just reshape the world around you. And here's your children's role play. They don't know who the hell to be. Confuse them. Create gender confusion, because there's pretty specific things that men and women are supposed to be, and that's all children want to know. Who am I supposed to be? How do I grow and develop? They need guidance. You ever hear the idea of children as little sponges? They're soaking up everything. Yeah, so give them a whole bunch of stuff that destroys them and confuses them, because it makes it easier to push people around. Brzezinski wrote about it. He called humans robotoids. Between two ages, the coming technocratic era. What he saw for mankind, and he was evil, and probably still is. He's dead. But, right? Has to be. So, he called humans robotoids, like making people into not a human anymore, crossing over from being human, transhuman, crossing over from being human into something else, which is what they want to shape us into. And it probably has something to do with the stuff that they talk about when they talk about the bug man, and the idea of a hive mind, and the idea of degrading man to control him. The idea of Microsoft, Bill Gates saying, we want one education worldwide. We want to give everybody to Microsoft or McDonald's one world education, so that everybody thinks the same way, no matter what their language is. We have the technology. It's Mark Zuckerberg, another one of these rich guys, Bill Gates, and these guys that they let us know about. And they say, here, you're going to be a computer guy, even though really his legacy, his dad was a eugenics guy. And Mark Zuckerberg saying, the fake Facebook guy or whatever, saying in the future kids won't have friends because they won't need them. Your friends will be AIs. We'll give you your friends. You don't need each other. That's totally divide and conquer, isolated, live in the pod, in the matrix way of thinking. Completely manipulable bio units. It's disgusting. The richest people in the world could uplift mankind with their resources and build us up and make the air cleaner and the water cleaner and the food better, and instead they're poisoning every single one of these things while they themselves do and have something other, and make families and continue in their lines while they want to destroy ours and say, you'll be whatever we make you into, and we don't need anybody being a man or a woman, and certainly no heroes, whether male or female. Enough of that. Again, to go back to the idea of, here's a female hero, they're taking the place of a man. Why do you hate them? Because there's no virtues in them. There's nothing about a hero in them. They're just abhorrent, evil, toxic male, toxic female. We don't like these characters, so don't be those characters. But at the same time, kids are like, well, I don't know who to be then. And it probably won't work. I say all these things that they're doing evils against us. But if you take everything away from anybody, it's going to kind of push them to those qualities that are innate, that are put in us probably by design for sane and rational functioning in the world. If you take that away from everybody, a lot of people will be broken, but also a lot of people are going to find out that they will be willing to lay down their lives for things that are good, that are true. So create technology that ruins and destroys that. Control people with the drugs in their mind by the things that they watch. Netflix and pills is the future that they want. Just keep watching and we're going to destroy the world around you, and we're going to make sure that your kids and your grandkids and your great-grandkids have no idea how to be until we figure out how to have hatcheries like Brave New World, and you don't need a mom anymore. Everybody has Lenina, and she was named after Lennon and not John Lennon. And she's nuts. Lenina is nuts. So nuts that John the Savage hung himself in a lighthouse rather than he gave up on love, and that's what Winston and Julia do in 1984. Give up on love, because we know that love is the thing that helps win wars against evil, even though we all know wars are made up. Maybe we don't know, but wars are like a made up manufactured thing to just sacrifice people up. All the war, you can see the setups of wars. All those tricks of the past are laid out on the table of how they set up people to fight against each other, to kill each other, for whatever the wealthy elite whose fortunes shape the fates of nations wanted. We want this. Make them fight each other to get it. And it's all the whole time molding and shaping us to, how do we control the world? Well, we kind of control it already, but we don't want people, we don't want any resistance anymore. How do the wealthy elite whose fortunes shape the fates of nations make their perfect world? By changing man into something fundamentally different. Even though I don't think it could be bred out of us, it's going to find a way to get out, and there's always going to be a problem. So ultimately, their plans for evil to destroy the world can't possibly work, but they're going to try, because there's nothing else to do. What do you do when you have it all? Trash it. It's kind of like gambling in a way. What do some people say about gambling? It's not really about winning. It's about losing everything. It's like annihilation. So the wealthy elite whose fortunes shape the fates of nations have everything, and it's just not enough. So just trash it all. Just trash everything. Just turn it to shit. And, you know, it starts with childhood and role play and pretending to be things, because kids do that to know what they should be when they grow up, and they, you know, it's taken away from them. That's why we have all these terrible, evil messages and movies and TV shows and video games. It's just about destroying us so that the kids don't know who to be or who to find when they grow up, and just take whatever they were given. And we won't be given anything, because we'll own nothing. You'll live in a pod and you'll eat bugs. They don't need to make us eat bugs. They want to make us eat bugs. It's humiliation. They're not going to eat bugs. What science fiction, the entire genre of science fiction, is predicated upon, here's what we want you to think the future will be like. So here you go, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta. Here's your future. Teen dystopian sci-fi, Hunger Games. You guys are going to be sacrificed. The best and brightest. And also, you know, Hunger Games is just a metaphor for war. Hey, we want you guys to fight each other, kill each other, and so that we can keep our power and authority. All those weapons that they're stockpiling aren't to protect the people who live in that nation. They're to protect the authority of the people in charge of that nation, so that nobody tries to do anything. Because if we can't have it, who knows what we'll do? Maybe we'll just use the Samson option and preemptively destroy everything for everybody. We want it our way, and if we can't have it our way, we're going to wreck it for everybody. It's easier for a rich man, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. And where's that analogy come from? It comes from Jesus in the Bible. Jesus said that. He said it's easier, I'll say it again because I butchered it. It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. It's just something about having too much that corrupts us. When we have too much and we're not willing to share. And when we keep getting rich, and instead of sharing it and uplifting mankind, we just want to keep taking away everything from everybody so that we can have more, to the point where rich people get together and conspire with one another to do what? Take everything away from everybody and we'll split it up. And then what do? Well, that's just like basically pushing the self-destruct button on the whole world. And that's where, you know, God has to come in and say, okay, that's enough of this shit. Right? I think so. So, that's why all your movies suck. That's why, Batman's not Batman and Superman's not Superman. And even though these guys are just idol worship and veneration of the old gods, but there still was something of the idea of, okay, we're going to worship the old gods, but there's still an idea of how to be a man, how to be a woman. I mean, like, when they talk about, everybody talks about psyops, they openly talk about this now, talk about ops and all this stuff. Disney had the princess programming. What's a Disney princess? It's basically a useless thing. It's a strong, independent woman that's not a mom, not a wife, not doing anything. It's just sitting in, it's just a divided and conquered, isolated bio unit, a robotoid, if you will. You're a princess, you're great, we should just have everything handed to you, but just stay in the Tower of Rapunzel, or Sleeping Beauty, or Cinderella. It's not anything that a girl can grow up to do anything with. It's just be a princess, just be entitled. That's why everybody talks about these women, young women with the entitlement and all this stuff, and the Karens and their entitlement. It's all stages of our devolution to globalization, and globalization is one world government, and one world government makes God come back and settle the earth and settle the gods. So yeah, like, kids just need an example of who to be and who to find for peace on earth for all mankind, and the richest people in the world know that, so they don't want anybody to have it, and that's why Gen Alpha can't read. And they want you to eat bugs because they hate you, because they've lost something. The richest people in the world have sold their souls, and we all still have them. So they want our souls. They just don't want us to have them anymore. I think that's really at the core of it. Look at these people. They're disgusting. These are soulless beings. It's the idea of a vampire. What do you want to be after high school, Bella? For teenagers. You want to be a werewolf, or do you want to be a vampire? You want to roll around with the dogs down here, and you want to go upstairs and feed off the life essence of the living. Except it's going to cost you your soul. But what do you want to do, Bella? Join us. Vampires have more money, and they drink blood. They feed off the vital essence of all the creatures on the planet, like Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal, that's some kind of weird Gnostic gobbledygook about the union of good and bad, and somehow, like, if we could just have a perfect balance of good and evil, everything will shake out. Wrong. The Skeksis feed off the vital essence of all the people on the planet. They're vampires. Bella chose being a vampire. They have more money. She's a Disney princess. How could she not be? Bella grew up with Disney princess mind control, monarch mind control programming or whatever. And that's what we grew up with. That's why all the movies and TV shows suck in summation. That's why the video games are terrible. And they want to take away your they don't want you to have the old console and play old video games. There's still some kind of remnant of the idea of a hero virtue in those games. Or if you want to have any idea of being a hero or a hero virtue, keep it to the games, because that shit doesn't work in the real world. Child labor laws made it so that we couldn't put kids in the mines. So now instead we put them in Minecraft, or if you want to call it that, Mindcraft. Guess what? We're so evil, expletive deleted, that we've got your kids back in the mines, and it's completely non-productive. Before we had kids in the mines dying to get to mine for resources. Now they're in Minecraft or Mindcraft, and it's just a waste of just pissing your life away. And it does completely nothing. Chicken jockey, bleh. That's Epsilon shit. And Jack Black worships the devil, like, openly. That's not good. And people don't tell you that they don't like him. Most people don't like Jack Black, but you can have him. Who do you want to be? Be like Jack Black. He's a fat slob, and it's useless. And he worships the devil. He played the devil. He played the devil in a Christmas movie. Hey, Christmas is supposed to be about the birth of Jesus, right or wrong. Let's make it about Santa. And Santa is a perfect anagram for Satan. All you have to do is switch the N and the A, and you got Satan. So have Jack Black, fat slob guy, Bugman, or whatever you want to call him, have him play the devil, have him play Santa Claus. It's the same guy. Maybe you want to sell your soul for earthly things. Maybe you'd like to have them. We're heading into a post-consumer society. Hey, guess what? You're the consumer. Post you. You can't buy shit anymore. You can't own anything. Here's the Elon Musk car. You can never own it. Forget about the Tesla. All right, that's old news. Here's the new car, whatever he's calling it. You can lease it. 50-year mortgages. You know what a mortgage is? It literally means it's mort, age, death, pledge. That's what a mortgage is. It's a death pledge. 50-year death pledge. Hey, you're not going to own your house ever. Or you can own it until you die, and then you don't need that shit anymore, and then it goes back to whatever, BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard. It's the same. They're all the same. So, what are we supposed to do about it? Honestly, pray to God. And his name is Jesus Christ. Pray to God. We're supposed to be praying against Lucius Trust, BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard. We're supposed to be praying for the destruction of the Bilderberg Group and all its agenda checkpoints. We're supposed to be praying for the utter failure of Vision 2030 or Agenda 2030. Pray against Plandopolis megacities. Pray for the destruction of the World Economic Forum and that it can't be reformed into something more evil or evil at all. Pray for the destruction of the plans for living in the pod, eating the bugs, owning nothing and loving it. Pray to God. Decide to join the camp of the saints instead of becoming part of the forces of darkness in the battle of Gog Magog. Okay? You have a choice to make, good or evil. And they don't want kids to have that for their role play. They want to say, you know what, the bad guys aren't so bad. That's why they take all the villains in the movies and TV shows and say, you know what, Cruella de Vil wanted to make a coat out of puppies and we all love puppies. But you know what, she wasn't so bad. She's kind of cool, actually. Darth Vader was just misunderstood and he doesn't matter anyway because we've got Rey now. And she's both your hero and a Palpatine. She's a blue blood. And, go through the rest of the movies and TV shows. Here's Tony Stark, he's Iron Man. He represents the military-industrial complex who creates all the problems. And he's also going to be the same guy that solves all the problems. Because that's all three Iron Man movies. And it's also the same with the whole Avengers thing. Tony Stark uses technology, makes a problem for the whole world, and then he has to undo it. So, is that not in some way like Hegelian dialectics where Tony Stark creates a problem, the world has a reaction, hey, you guys all need superhero IDs, and if you don't want a superhero ID, you're going to go to prison. And then Paul Rudd and Captain America and those guys that don't go along with it go to jail. So Tony Stark creates a problem, the world has a reaction, and then they offer the solution, whatever it is that we say. And now Tony Stark is also playing, now Iron Man's Doctor Doom. You know what I mean? And who's the big Marvel hero for the next movies that nobody gives a shit about, that they just want to make videos to mock? Hey, we had the Avengers movies and Tony Stark laid down his life to save the Marvel universe. Now Tony Stark is going to be Doctor Doom and he's going to destroy the universe. You like him? He's a hero? Not a hero anymore. He's a villain. You like Captain America? He sucks. We don't want you to like him. You like a pretty girl? We don't want you to like her. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is you like, they just want to wreck it and say it's not what you think it is or what you want it to be. It's what we say that it is. And just keep being confused. Be confused about... You don't have to be what you are. You don't have to grow up to be a man or a woman. You can grow up and be whatever you want, just so long as it's not a man or a woman or a hero of virtue as a man or a woman. No. Shit in a litter box in elementary school or primary school or whatever you call it in your country. You can be a kitty cat boy forever. Let's blur boundaries. Let's blur the boundaries between corporeal and incorporeal, and just ruin the world. It's being a wealthy elite, richest person in the world is somebody who doesn't think clearly. They just, the Jesus quote. Why? Because what do you give to the man who has everything? Well, he wants to make a button to delete the world if his power and authority is threatened, right? If I can't have it my way and it's my time to go and I have to face God at the end of all this, delete, send hydrogen bombs all over, whatever you believe. They just don't want kids to have any idea who to be or who to find when they grow up. And here's what it is, just to summarize this and stop talking, is we need an example of who to be and who to find for peace on earth for all mankind, and probably we can't get there without God, even though within us by design are these things that are innately to sort of seek out and want things to be righteous and just and all those things. And these are probably things that God put into us by design, whatever you believe about that or your ideas of God. But you can see how the powers that be hate the idea of a righteous and just God and a healthy world, because they're using all their money to destroy everything, not make everything better. They tell us it's climate change, and because it is, they're changing the climate. They use geoengineering to do it, and they tell us don't pay attention to the jets in the sky. And then they tell us the UK government has decided, hey, we're going to use jets in the sky to block out the sun because climate change. Yeah, you're changing the climate and they're evil. And they want your kids to be perverts and losers. The strategy is divide and conquer, because if everyone's isolated and alone and selfish, then they can take over the whole world, because we won't stand up and fight against the powers that be. And people are fighting against it through the content that they make online, and we're finding about all their dirty tricks and the truths of history. So they want to push the delete button on as many people as here as possible, because then they have a better chance of taking over the world, because they gave us a thing to find out. They gave us the internet so they could find out everything about us, to program us. And now we're using that technology that was by design to be against mankind. We're using it for all the stuff that they hate. So and they probably saw into this. They're like, well, we want to find out about everybody. Then they're going to find out about us. And then we're going to have to start killing people all over the world en masse, so that we can get those numbers down. This is Bilderberg meeting stuff. So that we can get those numbers down, so that we can control the population, because there'll be less of one. We're going to traumatize people and tell them, if you want to live at all, you saw what happened, you saw what you lived through, now do what we say, or we're going to kill you too. And they will, if they can't get their way. But there's nothing else for us to do but to fight against it, because it's probably a prerequisite to get into heaven. You can't just do nothing about it. You got to do something. And one of the few things we can do in the world is make videos to tell the truth about it and try and get them out there so as many people see them as possible. And it's working. The dark forces technology that were used to destroy mankind are now being used against them. Ha! How about that? Don't give up. Because this is doing something about it. Maybe it seems like it's just talking, but it's also a way of resisting what it is that they want to do to us. And I hope you're grasping that. Fighting against how they want to program us and make us to be is worth being willing to lay down your life for. Look at what's happened to the world. They want us to fight each other, and they want men and women to hate each other. And it's the most basic thing about being a man or a woman, is that by design we're made to find each other and be together and to be friends and to have groups and to get along with each other. And that's complete opposite of a divide and conquer strategy. They tell us they want us to be together in diversity and inclusion, but it's just like the lies that they give us in 1984. The Ministry of Truth tells lies. The Ministry of peace starts wars. And, the Department of Defense is a department of making war, of warring. I mean, that's in real life. And that's the lies that they want us to have. They tell us that it's DEI and diversity and inclusion and movies and entertainment, and they want it across the board and no escape from it. That's doing the right thing. But really what they're doing with that is creating divisions. And divide and conquer is the strategy. And, to break that down for the last time, it's to isolate everyone so that we can't get together. And, the internet is a tool used to isolate and divide us into little groups and stuff like that, and then have people in groups not even get along with each other. But we're also using it to come together and doing the right thing, because it's innate within us by design. That even if they take away from us in movies and TV shows the idea of a hero virtue, there's no way of getting rid of them. There's no way of breeding that out of us. And they're trying, and it's still not working. So, destroy is a huge section of mankind, worldwide, and then they'll be there to clean up the mess and use traumatizing people, which is something they just do. They traumatize us through movies and TV shows, through whatever genre you're watching, traumatize people through horror, science fiction, romance stories. But actually they want to traumatize us in real life and the real world. And, they've always been going after our kids because they want to change, they want to retard our development. And you can see through the history of movies and TV shows what they've done to us. And it's ultimately still not going to work. And amen to that. So start praying to God. And His name is Jesus, and you can use it. Pray for help. And He was our example of a man. So, find out about Him and read the Bible. Because the wealthy elite whose fortune shaped the fates of the nation have plans on how to change what our idea of God is. They're building us up for a letdown. They want to tell people, yeah, go ahead and be Christians because we have plans for what we're going to do to Christianity and that you love Jesus so much. And they want to wreck it. And it's in an old movie, George Lucas, before he made Star Wars, he made THX 1138. And in that future, people do confessions before Jesus, Jesus AI or something like this. And it's just the way that the state finds out what you're thinking by telling your deepest thoughts and secrets to not Jesus, but to them. And then they use that to continue to manipulate us. It's not going to work. Yes, a lot of people, yes, setting up the Battle of Gog-Magog, where the forces of darkness, forces of Gog-Magog, forces of evil, forces of darkness, same thing, prepare themselves for war against the camp of the saints like grains of sand in the sea. That's a lot of people. But each and every person probably has a lot of demons in them, whether you want to take that literally or figuratively. I could say both would be accurate. But that means there is a camp of the saints. And if you know that story, if you like stories, the best ultimate hero of virtue is Jesus. And guess how the story of Jesus ends in the Revelation? Gog-Magog loses, and the good guys win. And then after that is the great white throne judgment. And then what? No more tears. And for how long? Forever. That's the longest amount of time there is. I think you want to be on the side of the good guys. Yeah, start praying to God and ask for help. That's what prayer is for. We have a direct line to the creator and maker of all things, and He wants us to get to know Him and ask for help and pray and fight the good fight and pray against these things I said earlier to pray against. Pray for the destruction and utter failure of the plans of the wealthy elite whose fortunes shape the fates of nations. Pray that all their agenda checkpoints they feel as though they've already achieved be undone, each and every single one. That's what prayer is for. You're taking it to the top, none higher. Pray to God, because the wealthy elite whose fortunes shape the fates of nations hate when you do that. And that's why every single writing or treatise or whatever you want to call it on globalization says we got to get this idea that people would pray to God and ask for help out of the way, because the rich people know know who God is, because underneath it all, they worship the devil. That's their template of how to be, or who to be. That's why Jesus said it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for the rich man to get into heaven, because he knew what he was talking about. Word. And he is the Word. And in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And Jesus is the Word of God. So word to your Father who art in heaven. Start praying to God, because it does make a difference. And prayer is an effective weapon against the forces of darkness, because in a world where they continue to try to take everything away from us, the last thing that they'll be able to take is our ability to pray to God. And that's all that's left. It's the last refuge of a scoundrel, is a prayer for repentance for all the evil we've done, for the ignorance in our lives. And when we pray to God and ask for help and ask for salvation, and we can pray for other people. Even if we're a horrible case, we can pray for other people to be saved. And God hears those prayers and says, you know what, I'm going to help that person. And it's also not a selfish thing to pray for others. It's a selfish thing to pray for ourselves. And I feel like I've already stated pretty clearly that the wealthy elite whose fortunes shape the fates of nations want us to be selfish. That's part of the divide and conquer strategy. Think about yourself and don't get together on anything. That's how we can control you. But when you pray for others and pray for the people of the world to God, which is the most advanced technology we're ever going to have access to, and the richest people in the world aren't praying to God for that stuff, because He would never grant the things that they want. That's why they have to use force and evil and darkness and worship the devil, because that's the only person that's going to help them get what they want and keep it. And they know that they can't. And they know that they've already lost, because that's the end of the book of Revelation. Spoiler alert for the end of the Bible. The good guys win. Don't you want to be one of them? Amen to that.